right, I will kickstart us on talking about technology and how it impacts anxiety. Before I dive too much into that, I want to make sure we all are on the same page what we mean by anxiety, because often anxiety and stress are two terms that are used interchangeably. In fact, directly, because stress and anxiety are very different. In the technical terms, anxiety is chronic, it is medical, while stress is more of a situational trigger. So I was thinking about this as I was preparing, and the stress of I'm about to do public speaking and I need to prepare for that. How I know that this is stress versus anxiety is that after tonight, my anxiety or my stress is going to go down. I'm going to be able to sleep well. I'm going to have a sense of relief that's in the past. Also, the stress, the energy motivated me to do the research, to get this done. And it allowed me to kind of that natural motivation to be productive. Where anxiety, on the other hand, can shut you down or can result in more like panic type symptoms. And they usually show up in four different ways. One is different types of body symptoms. So it's that we call psychomotor agitation, aka the shaking of your hands or the shaking of your feet. So if you ever notice somebody, their foot's shaking a lot, that might mean their anxiety or their arousal level is higher. I don't know if you've ever noticed your hands are cold, yet they are sweating. That is a sign of anxiety as well. This can be full body tension or a certain part of your body. I know I had a car accident when I was younger, and so this shoulder was injured. And whenever I'm anxious, I just feel a lot more tightness here in my body. So it's a little bit weaker part of my body. You may have noticed that too. This can also be stomach upset, nausea, that kind of thing. This can also look like changes in behavior. And for our children, this is them acting out. This is them acting not their age or regression. This is also difficulty sleeping. I'm not able to go to sleep when I want to. I'm not able to stay asleep. In children, especially, increased need for control. So these are your confrontation, like I saw in the words. This is the battle. This is the control back and forth with whether or not they get off technology or whether or not they follow through with what they're supposed to. They will do those temper tantrums. And teenagers have just teenage temper tantrums. We've probably all seen one before. And then acts of avoidance. So sometimes we upregulate and we kind of throw a lot at you, or we shut down and pull away. And so this will be shutting down, avoiding the conflict, hiding things from you, things like that. So anxiety, again, is more on the medical, chronic, it doesn't turn off side, whereas stress, it's situational. Okay. So how does technology and anxiety go together? So like I was saying, we either upregulate when we get hyperarousal. This is where a kid may scream or have a temper tantrum or have a control battle with you, or they'll shut down. So let's say you tell them to get off their technology, it's time to take a break. Upregulating hyperarousal may be them like fighting with you about it or yelling at you or getting mad. Hypoarousal, the shut down, may look like them just throwing their tablet against the bed or something and then slamming the door and not talking to you for a while. Someone needing a break and needing some downtime is very different than shutting down, and you can kind of feel the difference. It's that like they're distant, they're gone, they're not as present, versus like I'm just tired. They know they're tired. They can talk about being tired. That's the difference between those two things. And so this is what it can look like when your child is attempting to cope with the anxiety they may be feeling around technology. And so with the research around anxiety and technology is one, the dopamine pathways are really important here. So when someone is playfully using technology, so school may be a little different. You doing research, checking your emails, and then playing a game or watching Netflix are very different neural pathways for us with technology. But when we're playing games and having that instant gratification constantly, we get dopamine triggered. Dopamine is the reward pathway of the brain. We get dopamine released anytime we eat food, we laugh with a friend, even when we have to use the bathroom really bad and we finally get to go, that relief, anything that is associated with living and thriving, dopamine is released. However, when we use drugs and alcohol, when we use technology in high amounts, and I associate both of those together on purpose, what's really important here is that the dopamine levels go way higher than the average everyday living. So everything else feels boring. Everything else feels dull. Food even isn't as enjoyable. Life isn't as enjoyable. So those who are struggling with alcohol or drugs, the first 3 months of their sobriety when they're attempting to be sober are extremely difficult because the body is reacclimating to the lower levels of dopamine. And so everything feels dull and boring. And so that's why with children who use a lot of technology, oh, I'm so bored, all the time, oh, I don't want to do that, when it's like other kids are having a great time doing that. That's why. And so chronic use, high levels use of technology, I would say more than 2 hours a day, can lead to this. And so it literally is an addiction of the brain. Giving a child a tablet to play with more than that is like giving a child crack cocaine. It's the same neural pathways. I'm not saying they're addicted to drugs, but it's the same kind of brain process. And so if they have any natural types of anxiety, if they're on a medication, if they're working on coping skills with anxiety already, the use of technology is only going to worsen. It's going to almost undo any of the work if it goes past these chronic states. Now, if the child's using it a lot for school, research, writing papers, again, that's different with the neural pathways than if they're playing games or on social media or on things like that. So I just want to keep those two things separate. So I don't want you guys thinking, oh no, my child's going to be really doomed if they're on the computer a lot typing papers. That's okay. That's a different, they're working. And so it's not the same dopamine hit. And on the other hand though, too, so these first two that I was talking about was more about how the brain works. These other two are more about social connection. So with anxiety, one of the main reductions of anxiety is co-regulation with another. When a baby is crying, what do we all do? We want to pick it up. We are naturally primed to the child, that skin-to-skin contact, the rocking, the cooing, we calm down. We have the same brain as an infant. We are much more advanced, neurologically than an infant is, but we still have that need for connection. And it's the fastest way we can calm down and co-regulate. And so when we're connecting via social media, it's fake connection. It's not the same thing. I mean, compare walking into a room and someone's face lighting up, happy to see you, versus, hey, what's up, in a text message. They feel totally different. And so kids are missing out, teens are missing out on really great connection, learning skills, because they're doing it on the tablets. And so that can also be an anxiety increaser. And then pressure as well. So the pressure to, hey, all my friends are online, I'm not going to be in the loop if I'm not online tonight, or that FOMO, fear of missing out. There's just this anxiety. And a lot of that comes from the culture right now of middle schoolers and high schoolers of, there's just this constant beat going where, in my generation where I grew up, we only talked at school, right? We had landlines and we had to ask permission to use them. And now there is this this more intensity around connection online. And so my suggestion here would be to get them in clubs, get them in sports where they have in-person connection with a team or with a club. And I know your school provides a lot of those. And so that's like, hey, we're meeting together, and getting that together time. All right, so how can you help with the anxiety portion? Create routines with technology and clear limits. 1 hour, my suggestion is 1 hour during the weekdays, 2 hours on the weekend. Modeling, how much are you on the phone? Are you saying, hey, get off your technology as you're scrolling, right? And so it's, creating these family habits of this is how we treat technology in this family. This is how we use technology in this family. Are we on our phones at dinner, or are our phones down? Are we talking eye contact, that kind of thing? And then encouraging outdoor play. That thing is more regulating than the running, the kicking, the playing with neighborhood kids, getting their feet dirty. It's so good. It's fresh air. That's the antidote to technology. And so for my kids, if it's a 2-hour day on the weekend, those 2 hours are broken up. You've got to go be outside for 2 hours before you get another 30 minutes back on your tablet. So breaking those times up with outdoor play, getting outside, that kind of thing. And what can happen when a child is on technology a lot is they feel bored. And bored is almost like the enemy. Right? So make boring normal. Don't let them on technology all the time in the car. Let them stare out the window and get used to that. The younger they get used to boredom is okay, boredom is normal, the better they'll be able to react to it as a teenager, because boredom becomes a lot harder as a teenager. How the brain's growing and how it's producing emotion in a different way, it becomes a lot heavier and harder to manage than any other age of their life. And so if they're getting used to it as a kid, then it's not as difficult. It's not as heavy as a burden. So making, like, my kids will say, I'm bored in the back of the car. And I'm like, good. I am too. Let's look at the trees, that kind of thing. And then what that boredom creates a space for creativity. Hey, mom, did you notice that outside? That won't happen if their face is in a tablet. So that space for creativity is actually the best form of education. and develop brain development.
So my section's on technology and self-esteem and body image. And so I actually broke this up. So we're going to do body image first and then self-esteem second. But to just kind of introduce it, right? So technology is everywhere. We can't escape it. And our kids are living in a world where it's really deeply woven into their daily lives. And I think the question is, how can we make sure the impact is healthy? And so we know connection can be great. So the kind of the next point of connection versus distortion, right? So connection is great. So your text messaging app and social media and WhatsApp, or these different ways that you can like play games with your friends, it helps us stay in touch, share experiences, and we can be part of communities with technology. So, I use social media and technology to like connect with friends and listen to meditations. And even though I'm a therapist, I actually really do listen to them outside of the therapy room. And then like on a rough day, if you need a puppy video, you can go on YouTube and like look up something cute. Kind of besides the lightheartedness, it really can be a good tool for connection, but then it can also kind of create distortions in kids and teens. And so distortions, I think, are really huge issues. Distortions are irrational or biased ways of thinking that can lead to negative feelings and behaviors. Like I said, technology, even though it can promote connection, it can also help grow these like pesky distortions in your kid and teen that just don't seem to go away. So social media, doom scrolling, photo comparisons, if you're being bullied over text messaging in a group chat, they can all lead to these negative distortions that we develop. And so these patterns of thought can impact how we perceive ourselves and the world around us. And often, it might make us feel like things are worse than they actually are. And then for elementary, middle, and high schoolers, and even adults, cognitive distortions can affect self-esteem and body image. So that's kind of the relation between the technology and self-esteem and body image. And these distortions can affect body image and self-esteem, especially in the context of like social media and text messages, threads that you have going between your friends, because that's where comparisons start increasing and pressures get high, peer pressure. And then one thing I wanted to pass along is this idea of we need to be thinking about who's posting the images and videos, who's sharing them, what's their purpose, and are these real, or are they highly edited, filtered, photoshopped, or is your friend really just wanting to talk about this great vacation they went on, but they're not talking about the self-esteem struggles they're going through themselves? So it can be linked to issues such as anxiety, depression, disordered eating, and low self-esteem. And so we're tackling a lot of those in this presentation today. So just a quick little research article I saw, and I know that they surveyed teens 13 to 17, but more than half of the teens say it would be difficult for them to give up social media. So that's a huge number, and it shows just how much social media has become a part of their day-to-day routine. And even if it is about connecting with friends, it's also the fact that it's influencing them and it's there. And then we've also got some teens, especially older girls, avoid posting certain things on social media because of fear of embarrassment or other reasons. So this is pretty telling that, we are pressured to convey our best selves on social media, and that's a lot of stress. And then nearly half of parents with teens are highly worried that their child could be exposed to explicit content on social media. And so this research article has a little after that, and it's not just sexually explicit, it's explicit material, things that they would not be wanting their kid to be exposed to. So those are just some statistics before we jump in. So how technology affects body image and eating disorders. So these all kind of go hand in hand, but social media can make it feel like everyone else has the perfect body or the perfect life, right? And so kids, teens, they see these edited photos, filters, and influencers, and they start comparing themselves to these images that they see online. And they feel like they might not measure up. And so this idea of social media comparisons really comes to play when it comes to body image. Editing and filters, it's become such a thing where you can just download an app and voila. And so, one person who posts a picture and it's this quotation marks ideal body image, and your child sees it and goes, why don't I look like that? But they don't look like that. Kind of goes hand in hand with fitness and diet culture. So because we have this unrealistic kind of perfect standard of a body image, a lot of these Fitspo accounts are popping up. Even on YouTube, videos about like, if you eat restricted amount of calories, or if you do, X amount of working out, you'll get this body type. Kind of goes into the trends promoting perfect body types, and then peer pressure and body shaming. So peer pressure, if your friends are looking one way and you feel like, oh, I just don't really like that part of my body. And then the more that your friends talk about it or post about it, the more that you become insecure, because we start comparing and we start having these distortions about ourselves. And then just likes and comments, just this idea of external validation really affects body image too. It's, you posted this picture in this really pretty dress and I got 80 likes, and my friend posted hers and she got 200. What's wrong with me? And so these are just a few. There are way more, but these are just a few ideas on how technology affects body image. So I'm going to let you guys read this yourselves, but I'm introducing the idea of eating disorders because I'm not saying that technology and social media and negative cognitive distortions immediately equals an eating disorder, because it doesn't, right? But there are just things that we need to look out for. And so technology plays a significant role in the rise of eating disorders, especially through social media, texting, online platforms. And so constant exposure to idolized or ideas of perfect bodies can increase body dissatisfaction, and it can lead to unhealthy behaviors. So I always like to tell people who come in that your disordered eating doesn't have to be an eating disorder, but it's still something that we need to process and address. And so, for example, anorexia may be fueled by pressure to maintain a slim appearance and restrict calories, and bulimia can be glorification of extreme dieting and purging. And then if we go to the next slide, just to kind of introduce a few more, but binge eating can be triggered by emotional distress. So actually, if we're feeling low self-esteem, we're feeling anxious, like Erica just talked about, and our friends aren't texting us back, and or a relationship is a little bit off, then we might be triggered to binge. And then so these kind of constant exposures to unrealistic portrayals of beauty and weight can distort our self-image and create some harmful eating patterns. And then I included ARFID and OSFED just so that, if you're thinking, oh, you know what, I'm reading this and I think my child has a little bit of this, you can definitely research a little bit more and maybe find some professional help. But ARFID is not so much about weight or appearance. And OSFED is if the disordered eating cannot fit into the other categories. So just kind of introducing those as things to look out for in your child. So again, following the things to watch out for, we've got frequent comments on weight or appearance, obsessive focus on food or eating habits, avoidance of social situations involving food. So if they have like a kid's having a pizza party and they're not really wanting to go, and it's a recurring thing, or they're not eating at lunch, changes in eating patterns, excessive exercise or workout routines. And I say excessive because your child working out is not a sign that, something's wrong. The excessive amount, discomfort with body changes, negative self-talk about body image, and then frequent checking of the mirror or body image rituals, things to look out for. And then things to try. So I know Erica touched on a few of these too, but setting screen time limits, I think, can be really great. Not only do they get kind of that quality personal one-on-one time with you or with friends, like Erica said, it's important. They also just get a break from the doom scrolling or even the video games. And sometimes even as adults, we don't want to be at a dinner table with everybody on their phones. So curating a positive feed. So there's certain accounts that we can follow, or certain YouTubers we can follow that really promote positive affirmations, mental well-being, encouraging open conversations. So really, I always give the question of like, how are you feeling throughout the day? Because, you're not just listing off what you did. You're really saying like, I was tired in the morning. I was really happy in the afternoon. Like, why were you tired? Why were you happy? But encouraging open conversations about body image too. So if you do notice some of that negative self-talk in your child or in your teen, fielding some questions, asking a little bit more, I'm noticing you're saying this a lot, do you know where this is stemming from? Can I support you in a certain way? Focusing on inner qualities, promoting offline activities, educating about filters and editing, which we kind of talked about, limiting exposure to harmful content, modeling healthy technology use. I know Erica touched on this as well, but you following those positive affirmations or those accounts that really promote some really mindful behaviors, they'll start following them as well. Self-compassion, and then encouraging mindfulness and mental health support. So Last little bit on mine is just how technology affects self-esteem. So again, we've got likes and social validation. So if my group chat is only responding to my friends and not responding to me when I'm asking them to go out to lunch, I might have some distortions. I might have some thoughts about myself. Why am I not being responded to? Do people like me? FOMO, like Erica said, fear of missing out. I saw you post a photo of, a dinner and I wasn't invited. Unhealthy viral challenges and peer pressure and online trends influencing popularity. I don't really want to do this trend of, I can't remember the last one I was going to use as an example, but I don't want to do this trend. I feel like it's unsafe. But, if I don't, then you're going to think negatively of me, or I'm going to be the kid who didn't do this. Again, the ideal perfect online image, and just unrealistic standards. Everyone, you see social media and they're posting these trips and these, beautiful photos, but they're not posting that, they had a really rough night, or that, they're really affected by their parents' divorce, or they're having some self-doubt about who they are, identity. So social media, yeah, so it can affect self-esteem because we're just seeing what people want to portray. Things to watch out for: so increased comparison to others, negative self-talk, the excessive use of filters and editing, and just body-related anxiety, which is kind of what we talked about with body image. And then things to take home: so encouraging critical thinking about media in general, or the text message threads that they're in with friends. Again, setting limits, promoting self-compassion. So we all have mirror neurons. So if they see mom and dad, or if they see mom and dad and dad really promoting a healthy mindset, then they're going to model that behavior. And so kind of falls into the last point of just modeling positive behavior. These are just some sources and references if you want to learn more.
All right. So if you will, if you're able to, I don't know if some people are on their phones on the meeting, you might be able to kind of minimize it and open up your camera to scan the QR code. Erica, you can click that link to show the results, or whenever you scan the QR code and vote, you can click results and see what the results are. But just want to kind of get a lay of the land and see what you guys think on if there is a correlation between technology and depression before we kick off this next section of technology and depression. So scan the QR code, cast your vote. It looks like so far everyone is saying yes, you think there is a correlation. I'll give it just another minute. If you want to pull up your camera, click the QR code and participate. Thank you. Okay, we've got a resounding yes. So we will start with that. If you'll go to the next slide, one back. Yep, there we go. First, just want to kind of talk about depression. And I'm going to include some different research studies from the National Institute of Health, the Mayo Clinic, and Child Mind Institute. This is the criteria straight out of our diagnostic manual for mental health disorders. So what is depression? What is the criteria you have to meet? Is persistent low mood or loss of interest in pleasure and activities for at least 2 weeks. And then 5 or more of the symptoms you see to the right of your screen that is present for most of that 2-week duration. Difficulty concentrating, psychomotor agitation, which Erica touched on, significant weight change, whether it's gain or loss, depressed mood, lack of interest, trouble with sleeping, worthlessness, suicidal ideation, change in energy, increased fatigue. And during adolescence specifically, the depressive symptomology can even be broader than in adulthood. So it could even present as your child is more irritable, they're aggressive in their responses to you, or they're avoidant of you. So there could be other behaviors outside of this list. And then important to note that there's not already another medical condition taking place or a use of a substance, and that it is causing significant distress in their life. And dependent on the number of symptoms present, it could categorize as a mild, moderate, severe depression. And then, of course, case by case, it could vary depending on what's going on in that person's life. Depression, though, is one of the most frequently occurring mental health disorders in the world, and adolescents in particular. It's a very relevant period of time for everything going on in their body and their mind and their life developmentally for depressive disorders to take place. And while I was doing reading, I saw that adolescents are called the digital natives, which I thought was interesting just because they're the first generation with social media, with technology, right there available since birth. So that is interesting to keep in mind. So here's what we do know about technology and depression. One, that among teens has up and that social use among teens has seems connected, right? But what comes first? Is it that you feel isolated and so you spend more time on social media or on technology looking for that connection to not feel as alone? Or do you spend time online and so then you start to feel alone? It can be a bit of a conundrum. From one of the articles from the National Institute of Health, they're really finding it's hard to find conclusive evidence on this correlation and this impact because it can swing both ways. There can be excessive comparison and excessive involvement, and then that is associated with depression. And also, social media can provide that social support or even provide knowledge, psychoeducation for people that are dealing with depression. So it's really kind of assessing the type of technology, the amount of technology that your child is using, and making sure that they're not missing out on that true connection or that it's disrupting their sleep. So it was tough because a lot of the research findings were a little bit unclear because it really is dependent on the impact that it's having, whether positive or negative, on your child. So instead of clicking that link, you can just go to the next slide. I copied the results just in case I wasn't the one controlling it or whatever to make it easier. So these were all the different research studies that were included in this report that I went through from the National Institute of Health. And so these are all the different results from each study. And so let me pull it up on my screen so I can just kind of synthesize it for you. They were studying and looking at adolescents, and a lot of the results, one of them says mixed results in the association of social media and technology with depression. Another is 1 in 5 studies found that social media technology does lead to depressive feelings dependent on the positive interaction, social support, and connectivity. If it was a positive interaction, positive effect on your child, then there were lower levels of depression. If they're following negative sites, if they're consuming with violent or content, or even kind of what Lila was pointing to, maybe following a lot of fitness inspiration accounts or whatever it is, then that could increase the depression levels. So a lot of these different studies were finding some evidence that there definitely is a connection dependent to on the content that your child is consuming with their technology. I think that a good takeaway for everybody, including myself, is that a lot of our tips and healthy habits are similar. So hopefully that feels less overwhelming to the parents, that maybe you can take away which ones you've seen on every presenter's slide. But one thing that I did want to include, and that's not directly on your screen, is the comments and the questions that parents are bringing to their children to discuss this or to try to implement change, rules, protection, boundaries, whatever that is. And it's just keeping in mind that, we've been in their shoes before, that it's challenging, but also that they're in a unique situation being the digital natives. So I always like to say, I may have walked in your shoes. I may have been a teenager before, but I haven't walked in your shoes with your feet. So I care about you and your experience, and I'm here for you. And I want to know what's going on or what the difficulties are. And so what I say a lot of times with my adolescents, and mostly whenever I have the parent check-in sessions, is if you do something and you're met with resistance or you're met with a reaction, I encourage you to take it in as data. Okay, so something that I just did activated my child, right? What was that? Why was that? I'm going to regulate myself versus meeting them with frustration that they talked back to me or that whatever it was. I'm going to regulate myself, take it in as data, assess it, and then I'm going to circle back because I'm the parent and say, hey, I noticed something happened there earlier. Can you tell me a little bit more about why it seemed like you got really upset when I brought that up? Help me understand what's going on or what you were thinking. So I think that that's a good framework too. And obviously, when we're talking about taking away cell phones or decreasing social media time, you may get hit with that resistance. And that could be a good step to kind of circle back and connect. But amount of time, turning off the notifications, balancing with outdoor time. Erica spoke to that, putting our phones away at least an hour before bed. And then aware of the accounts and modeling it yourself. Really helpful. And then I think the next slide is just my resources, maybe. Yes. So if you want to look at any of those other articles, I did find from the Child Mind Institute, and I thought this was interesting, is that social media can cut into the time that kids spend on activities that make them feel good, like exercise and different hobbies. It can distract from important tasks like homework, which can lead to increases in stress. I thought about that when we were talking about that our kids are on, you guys said 19%, or maybe it was 13% are on their phones or on technology for schoolwork. So factoring in, is their schoolwork causing stress to them, and how can we help them manage that? So I thought that that was interesting too. We're here for you guys. Yeah, thanks so much.
Hey y'all. So technology and sleep health, some that we may not first think that, they have correlation and they are linked to each other. So, why do we really think technology and sleep are related? What I do want to start with is things that we do know. And, which is first off, we use technology for just about everything from the time where we wake up, right? We all kind of use it as our alarm in the mornings. It's very common. And even to what we call doom scrolling at night, ever seems to be an end of it. And so, when we are laying in bed or on the couch trying to decompress throughout the day, we naturally just lean towards that phone and grab that phone. And whether we're on TikTok or social media or anything, just scrolling to kind of no end, really. And so also, I know we've all heard of blue light glasses, and they're made to shield us from the light that technology gives off and devices give off. And so there's actually been studies where the blue light from devices suppress the melatonin in us, leading to that sleep dysfunction. Then we have a hard time falling asleep at night. And so we all need sleep, right? to bring the sleep aspect in. When we get that, 8 on average, what we're supposed to get 8 hours, which can be hard to achieve sometimes. But when we do, right, good sleep is linked to good problem solving, good memory, and the capacity to deal with negative emotions. And so Dr. Mattingly, I hope I'm saying that correctly, he has done extensive research on cognition and in the brain, and he's actually a professor at the University of Notre Dame. And so he contributes this to sleep. A lot of maintenance processes happens when we sleep, and so we need that time to kind of rewire our brain and to recharge our brain in a sense, because with that sleep deprivation, if we get the chronic sleep deprivation, it really can lead to health problems down the road, and also depression and anxiety that we've touched on as well. And so to kind of focus on Stephen and Mattingly, this professor, he really states that remaining awake for longer periods of time, pathways in our brain will actually become non-functional over that time, forcing you to kind of use other non-efficient pathways. And he kind of relates this to think of when you're on a road trip, right? And you would normally take highways to get there because that's what gets you there the fastest, right? And so when those highways are shut down or maybe under construction, we really have to now find back roads and other roads and another route that will take us there to our destination, but it may take us longer, if that makes sense. And so it's kind of another way of looking at what this kind of lack of sleep does, and it forces us to use other brain power, we may not necessarily have at the moment, but we have to because what that lack of sleep does. And so he has this always on phenomenon of when we are on technology, it's as I said earlier, we are using it all times throughout the day. And especially since COVID, where really now we were doing things online before, but this was a complete shift to, we really can do everything remotely, can work, study, right, and do school. So there was kind of an expectation now that you are online, you have a device, you can always be available, and you can always answer those emails and answer those texts and things, which leads to heavy amounts of stress at home because you really can't turn it off. So that's that kind of always on phenomenon. So this is kind of more research showing that I kind of wanted to show the shift. So in 2011, there was a sleep poll, and this is from the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine, and 90% of Americans report technology use within the hour before bed. And this is actually the most crucial hour because this is when you're trying to wind down, right, from the entire day and trying to lessen the stress, stress hormones and get into that good sleep. And so 22% reported going to bed with their ringers on, and leading to the number one cause of being awoken and difficulty maintaining sleep. And I know we all have our phones plugged in next to us, right next to on our nightstand. And so the more devices used, whether this is, that added TV sound in the background, the more people had difficulty falling and even maintaining sleep. And so to jump to 2021, kind of get some more recent research, it was shown that 1 in 3 American adults are considered sleep deprived, because they're not getting that sufficient amount of sleep due to technology. And even in teens, this is 57%, because as we know, these have a lot of outlets of technology. And then overall, 55% of Americans consume caffeine because of this use of the technology and just not sleeping and getting that deep REM sleep that we so need to function on a daily basis. So then that, rise in caffeine is, if you've ever been, moody throughout the day, like I just need, a quick coffee to get me throughout the day. This is where that comes from. So recognizing those signs of, if you're on your phone or on the TV at night to wind down. On the next slide, I have some maybe solutions or things that we can alter in some of your nightly routines. So showing a little bit about what we can do. So practicing a good sleep hygiene. And so with this, and creating a nighttime routine, however that looks like to you, maybe, an hour before bed. Something that I actually have implemented within the last week is charging my phone in another room, like my bathroom, and using a digital alarm clock. I cannot tell you I've actually gotten up out of bed instead of immediately grabbing my phone. Now I'm out because I'm actually going to look for my phone, right? And to check there. And so it kind of gets you out of bed quicker. And so, creating a nighttime routine, maybe reading a book an hour before bed instead of scrolling and things like that. Avoid doing work and school into bed. Your phone does have a nighttime mode, so it shifts that light into a lot more sensitive. And then, so as technology becomes more prominent in our lives, sleep is crucial and we need it to function at 100%. I know we are all functioning, but is it at that 100% because of, how good are you sleeping, or are you sleeping all the way through the night? Try to think of different ways of trying to alter, your nighttime routine beforehand, and maybe drinking tea and a book or coloring or things like that, instead of, as we do kind of as muscle memories to grab that phone and keep scrolling.